All right, let's dive right in. We're going to tackle a really big question today. How in the world do we take something as powerful and, let's be honest, destructive as radiation and turn it into a tool that can save lives and fight cancer? The answer lies in a really fascinating field of science. You know, it really feels like a contradiction, doesn't it? We're taught to think of radiation as this dangerous force, yet it's one of the most important tools we have in modern medicine. So how is that possible? Well, it's not magic. It's about understanding the science so well that we can walk an incredibly fine line. And that science is called radiobiology. It's what gives us the key to wielding this double-edged sword, turning its raw power into a force for healing. So what is radiobiology? You can think of it as the official instruction manual for radiation. It's the meeting point where the high-energy, mind-bending world of physics crashes right into the complex, delicate world of biology. It's all about what happens at that moment of impact. To really get this, we have to zoom in. I mean, way, way in. We're going right to the front lines of this fight, down to the cellular battlefield itself. Everything, and I mean everything, starts right here, with the cell. And the single most important fact you need to know about the cell for our purposes today is that it's about 80% water. Yeah, just plain old water. That simple fact is going to be a huge deal in a minute, trust me. Okay, so inside that watery cell, you've got the nucleus. This is the command center, the headquarters. It's calling all the shots, telling the cell what to do, when to grow, and when to divide. And inside that command center is the ultimate bullseye, the DNA. See, cancer, at its core, is a disease of out-of-control cell division. So if you can damage the DNA of a cancer cell in just the right way, you can stop it from ever multiplying again. You're essentially sterilizing it. That is how you win this battle. Now, here's a key point. Cells aren't just sitting there waiting to be zapped. They're alive, they're dynamic, they're constantly moving through this cycle of growth and division. And that constant motion, it creates a window of opportunity. And here's that opportunity. A cell's weakness to radiation actually changes depending on where it is in that cycle. It's most vulnerable, most radiosensitive, right when it's actively dividing. And it's toughest when it's busy copying its DNA. This is exactly why treatments are often spread out over weeks. That process, called fractionation, is designed to catch more and more cancer cells at their weakest moment. Okay, so we know the target is the DNA, but how does radiation actually damage it? Well, there are basically two ways this can go down: a clean, direct strike, or a much more chaotic, indirect attack. So, direct action is exactly what it sounds like. A particle of radiation comes in and bam, it smacks right into the DNA molecule. It's like a sniper shot. But for X-rays, which are used in most radiation therapy, it's the indirect action that's the real star of the show. This causes about 2/3 of all the damage. It's less like a sniper shot and more like a ricochet that sets off a destructive chain reaction. Let's walk through that chain reaction. The X-ray comes in, but it doesn't hit the DNA. Instead, it hits a water molecule. And remember, the cell is mostly water. This collision creates something called a free radical, which is basically a tiny, super reactive, angry molecule. This little agent of chaos then bounces over and slams into the nearby DNA, breaking it. It's kind of brilliant in a terrifying way. The radiation turns the cell's own water into a weapon against itself. So what decides whether it's a direct hit or this indirect chaos? It all comes down to a concept called linear energy transfer, or LET. That sounds really technical, but you can just think of it as a measure of how much punch the radiation packs. How much energy does it dump in a small space? And you can really see the difference here. X-rays have what we call a low LET. They sprinkle their energy along a path, making it more likely they'll hit a random water molecule. But heavy particles, like neutrons, have a high LET. They're like a sledgehammer, dumping a ton of energy in a very tight spot, which makes it much more likely they'll score a direct hit on something important, like the DNA. So now we get the physics, we get the biology. But how do doctors and physicists turn all of this science into a successful treatment plan for a patient? This is where we move from the pure science to the strategy, and honestly, the art of radiation therapy. This right here is the whole game. This is the tightrope walk. The goal is to deliver a knockout blow to the tumor, while at the same time being as gentle as possible with all the healthy tissue that's right next door. Nailing that balance is what treatment planning is all about. And achieving that balance is why we don't give the radiation in one giant blast. We break it up into those smaller daily doses using that fractionation technique. It works by cleverly exploiting 5 key biological differences between cancer and healthy tissue. We call them the 5 Rs. Healthy cells are just better at repairing damage between treatments. The surviving cancer cells keep moving through their cycle, redistributing into those more sensitive phases where we can hit them next time. Healthy tissue can repopulate and grow back. And this next one is huge, reoxygenation. As the tumor shrinks, oxygen can get to parts that were starved before, making them weaker. And finally, radiosensitivity just reminds us that different types of cells naturally have different vulnerabilities.
And that brings us to the oxygen effect, which is so important. For the indirect damage caused by X-rays, oxygen is like gasoline on a fire. It makes those free radicals way more effective and locks in the damage. The problem? The centers of tumors are often oxygen-starved, which makes them resistant. So that process of reoxygenation we just talked about is absolutely critical for making sure we kill the entire tumor.
So when it's all said and done, a treatment plan is judged by 2 key metrics. First, there's the TCP, or tumor control probability. Simply put, what are the odds that we're going to wipe out this tumor? You want that number to be as high as possible, way over 50%. The second goal is the flip side of the coin, the NTPC, or normal tissue complication probability. We want to keep the chances of causing serious problems for the healthy tissue incredibly low, like less than 5%. A successful treatment is one that drives a huge wedge between a high TCP and a low NTCP. That gap, that's the therapeutic ratio. That's the win.
So when you put all these pieces together, the physics, the biology, the strategy, you start to see how we've learned to take this raw physical force and shape it into a sophisticated, precise medical tool.
At the end of the day, it all comes back to that instruction manual. Radiobiology gives us the knowledge to exploit all those little differences between cancer cells and healthy cells, how they repair, how they grow, how they use oxygen, and that knowledge is what allows us to tip the biological scales in the patient's favor. And that really is the most exciting part. We're learning more every single day. Every new discovery in radiobiology opens the door for smarter, more targeted, and safer treatments. It leaves you with this really hopeful question as our understanding gets deeper and deeper. Just how precise can these cures become?